The dangers of digital currency. Is America going to be able to avoid this danger? That's the topic of today's Bold and Blunt. And I'm your host, Cheryl Chumley, giving you a Christian conservative look at today's news, politics, culture, and events. Did you know that China has already pushed about 260 million people onto its digital yuan? And America is in the test phase, the study phase, the research and possibly development phase of developing its own digital dollar. And while Whole Foods grocery shoppers may love the idea of having such a convenient way to pay, Whole Foods being the chain of groceries with about 1,400 or so stores nationwide that just adopted a new palm reader as a form of payment, as a payment system. Well, those shoppers may love the idea of being able to just do away with any kind of cash or card transaction and just do everything digitally, right? Just do everything with a flash, with a wave, and so forth. Others in America may question, what's the repercussions of privacy for that, of government tracking and surveillance? After all, if China's doing it, if China's embracing it, shouldn't that be the red flag that we should do the opposite? Just a thought, just saying. Before I get into more of that, I want to quickly mention, if you like Bold and Blunt, you may get Bold and Blunt at edify.app, the online platform for your faith-based podcasts, at washingtontimes.com, where you may also subscribe to my Monday, Wednesday, Friday newsletter. Go to the bottom of washingtontimes.com, find the newsletter section. Click on my newsletter, Bold and Blunt with Cheryl Chumley, and you will get, once you subscribe, all my commentaries that I write all day long at the Washington Times, as well as my twice weekly Bold and Blunt podcasts. They come out Tuesdays and Thursdays. But you can also, right now, you can just go to Google or Bing or whatever your search engine is and type in Bold and Blunt podcast. And guess what? It'll pop up everywhere. Anywhere you get podcasts, you can subscribe to Bold and Blunt. Let me read you this piece from Reuters, not one of my favorite news wire services, because I noticed during the coronavirus how they just bent over backwards to defend Bill Gates on any sort of criticism. My goodness, it was disgusting. Talk about fawning. It was a new level of fawning. But on this, it has some interesting facts. Study shows 130 countries exploring central bank digital currencies, CBDCs, right? That came out June of this year, June 2023. Out of London, Reuters wrote this: a total of 130 countries representing 98% of the global economy are now exploring digital versions of their currencies, with almost half in advanced development, pilot or launch stages. A closely followed study shows. 130 countries doesn't sound like much. It's the second figure that's alarming. 98% of the global economy are now looking at digital versions of their currencies. That tells me that if America were to decide against going digital with its currency, that the rest of the world would basically become the dominant economies, right? America would be left out. It kind of reminds me of the debate over, should America be in the United Nations? And of course, patriotic Americans who love American sovereignty look at the UN and say, evil, evil, which it is, right? It's run by communists and globalists who hate America. And they wonder, why is America involved in this global bureaucracy that in turn turns around and tries to crumple everything that America stands for, everything that is great about America. And we should be removed from the United Nations. That's one principled stand, right? But the other line of logic there goes, the United Nations headquarters is in New York City. So it's kept at home, right? If that old motto, keep your friends close and your enemies closer, holds true, then with the United Nations headquarters, America certainly does that, right? Keeps them right in New York City. And if America were to remove itself from the UN, then America would remove itself from being an insider to many of the anti-American discussions and agendas that get pushed forth and that go forth at the United Nations, right? Sometimes you want to go right into the belly of the beast, not so that you can join forces with the beast, but so that you can arm yourself with the knowledge you need in order to more effectively fight the beast. So, two lines of logic on that. I can see both. Really, I favor America getting out of the United Nations because without America's funding, the UN would crumble. And if it didn't crumble just based on lack of finances, it would crumble because the message of America disdaining such a globalist organization would ripple around the world. And other countries would decide, well, we don't need the UN either. Anyhow, back to this Reuters piece. The research by the US-based Atlantic Council think tank, published in mid-July, said significant progress over the past 6 months meant that all G20 countries, with the exception of Argentina, were now in one of those advanced phases of development of digital currencies. 11 countries, including a number in the Caribbean and Nigeria, have already launched central bank digital currencies, CBDCs as they are known, while pilot testing in China now reaches 260 million people and covers 200 scenarios from e-commerce to government stimulus payments. Look, whatever communists do, Americans should do opposite. That's a general rule of thumb. That's where we should start discussions. Back to Reuters. Two other big emerging economies, India and Brazil, also plan to launch digital currencies next year. That's 2024. The European Central Bank is on track to begin its digital euro pilot ahead of a possible launch in 2028, while over 20 other countries will also take significant steps toward pilots this year. Now in the United States, what's America doing? What is America under feckless puppet Joe Biden doing? The president who's been steamrolled since he's taken office by globalist entities. In the United States, Reuters writes, progress on a digital dollar is only, quote, moving forward, end quote, for a wholesale, meaning bank-to-bank version. Whereas work on a retail version for use by the wider population has, quote, and stalled, end quote. U.S. President Joe Biden ordered government officials to assess the risks and benefits of creating a digital dollar in March 2022. Here's my assessment of where the digital currency in America is going to go. By and large, there are large swaths of Christian populations in America that are in tune, that are keyed in to watching for this digital currency, right? That are really alert to watching for the mark of the beast requirements of end time, right? Of biblical end times. And they're going to resist. And I put myself in that category. We're going to resist, right? And included in that Christian community, of course, are also patriots who are concerned about privacies and government tracking and government surveillance and the loss of financial control, the loss of freedom that comes with a system, a currency, a model where the government has ability to turn on and turn off access of the individual to that system. Look at what happened in Canada with the truckers when Justin Trudeau did not like how truckers were protesting vaccine requirements as conditions of continuing their trucking operations. And he tried to order them to take the vaccines and so forth. And instead of doing that, they protested and they filled the streets with their trucks. Well, Justin Trudeau just simply told the banks to prohibit their access to withdrawing their own funds. Now think, that's still where society is based on currency, paper currency, fiat currency, cash. Think of a society that's based simply on digital currency. Think how easy it would be for the government to control and flip the switch on you as an individual and your ability of accessing your own money, which is why China so loves digital currencies and why China is rapidly moving its citizens onto this form of currency, because complete control. Complete and utter control. Is that something America should seek? Digital currency, not control. Should America go down the path of digital currency? Well, we're going to face a time where if America doesn't, America is going to be kept out of much of the world economic markets, right? So here's my guess what's going to happen in America. To make digital currency and digital payments more enticing to the American citizen, we're going to start seeing things like what's happening to Whole Foods across America in more and more retail operations. We're going to start to see corporations, the woke corporations, doing the government's bidding. And by government, I mean the leftist government's bidding, pushing for digital payments, refusing to accept cash. Maybe they'll make it into a safety, a health issue, like they did during the coronavirus, where in some McDonald's, for instance, you could not even pay in cash. Maybe corporations will start moving off of cash and totally onto digital payments. And one of the ways they'll do this is by going more technology driven. Instead of having actual people at checkout counters serving as cashiers, they'll lay off that segment of the workforce, implement a uniform basic income, which is another dream of the globalists, and just put in machines where if you want to purchase something in the stores, then you have to pay by card first, and then second off, move that card payment into some sort of palm reading payment where it's based entirely off this digital currency in America. So in America, it won't be an overnight thing. In America, it'll be a slower normalization of it, where you get the youthful generations enamored with the idea of such convenience, right? Oh, look at me. I can just wave my hand and magic, the payment's made and be off and on my way. And I got out of this store fully 6 seconds before you because you had to count out your quarters and nickels. That's how it's going to go. It's going to move more normalized in this country, while at the same time we're going to have pressures from the global markets to comply in order to participate in much of the global economy. That's just one of the perils that are facing America right now and American freedoms. And I have a really great guest with me today who comes all the way from across the pond. He's in the United Kingdom, and he is tracking closely the coming of digital currencies in the United Kingdom, as well as all the other threats that are hitting America. Well, guess what? They're hitting the United Kingdom as well. His name is Jim Ferguson. He ran in 2019 for a political position with the Brexit Party. And nowadays, he is just tracking closely the perils to freedom and trying, like American patriots do, trying very hard to fight back this globalist government that's stealing rights, not just in America, but in the UK as well. Jim, thank you so much for being on Bold and Blunt. It is really great to have you here.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Cheryl. It's a great honour to be across the pond with you all the way from the UK.
Yeah, it really is the magic of technology. Sometimes it actually works for good. But the World Economic Forum is taking technology into a strange, brave new world direction. And I know from your Twitter feed, which is fascinating, I think people should follow you at Twitter, but you watch the World Economic Forum closely. What do you see taking place in terms of perils to individual liberties?
Well, I think that, like a lot of people, Cheryl, I didn't pay too much attention a number of years ago. Thought they were just a bunch of business people, globalists, sort of meeting in Davos, that it was reasonably harmless. However, when Klaus Schwab, the German chairman, spoke about having penetrated the cabinets of Western governments, I started to pay a lot more attention. Now, the perils that we are facing, well, as individuals, we are facing loss of freedoms because what they have actually done. I mean, if we take about the United States for a minute, you're being governed by the Biden administration, and their loyalty is not to you. Now, I don't say that as somebody that happens to like President Trump, because I'm a Brit. I couldn't even vote in your elections. But what's happening to the United States is happening to the United Kingdom and other countries as well. What do I mean by that? Well, basically, Klaus Schwab and his people around him have, since 1971, put their own people into positions of power, really by stealth, but they're quite open about it now. In fact, to the point where Klaus Schwab has actively bragged about it. And that means that although the World Economic Forum has no powers to write policy, they can direct their placemen like John Kerry, like Joe Biden, like Richie Sunak in the UK and his Chancellor Jeremy Hunt, as well as many others in other countries, Trudeau in Canada, Macron in France. These are all WEF members. And that means that we are looking at a loss of freedom individually using technology, 15-minute cities, central bank digital currencies, and many other things. It's coming. Its infrastructure is going in right now.
Central bank digital currency, CBDCs. Let's talk about that a minute, because here in America, there is a slow swell that is starting to push this digital currency forward. Joe Biden has just in recent months issued an executive order to start researching into the plausibility of bringing forth a digital currency in America. And the backlash is starting. What's taking place in your area now?
Well, Richie Sunak, the British Prime Minister, he has family connections to a company called Infosystems, or Infosys, through his wife, who's part of a very wealthy family. And he's coming under a great deal of scrutiny just now, as is Joe Biden, for involvement in sort of backroom deals and lots of money. And the thing is, CBDCs are going to completely eliminate cash. And cash gives people privacy. They can purchase things whenever they want. CBDCs are all about control. And it will even get to the point where you might end up, like all of us might end up, being forced down this path where cash is basically outlawed. And if you want to make a purchase of something, let's just say you want to go and buy some ammunition, or you want to go and buy some fuel. If somebody within the central banking system decides, well, we don't want you buying any more ammunition because you've already bought some, or we think you've traveled enough by car and you're polluting the atmosphere, they can stop that transaction before it even begins. That's the dystopian nightmare that CBDCs will bring into the fore. But before that happens, they're going to push for a digital ID. And digital ID is going to be used as a part of the lead-in to central bank digital currencies. It must be resisted at all costs, because it's going to give them complete control over everything that we try to do. They might decide you don't need to eat any more meat, so they'll stop you from buying any more steaks or burgers or whatever it is you want to purchase. That's the dystopian control. And we have to remember that people like John Kerry, the special presidential envoy in the United States, is a fully signed up member of the World Economic Forum. And the other big thing that I'm working on, which is also connected, is what they're looking to do to the farmers and the ranchers, because they want to put them out of business.
The digital ID, it's interesting because under the coronavirus lockdowns in America and around the world, you saw the use of the phrase digital passport, which is one and the same as the digital ID. And here in America, I was alarmed to see that there were some venues in New York City in blue run communities, meaning Democrat controlled jurisdictions, that actually put in place requirements that you had to show proof of your coronavirus shot on your digital passport as a condition of entry for those particular establishments. I see this spreading wide, and I have the exact same worries as you. Do you have an issue with your young people, as we do in America here, that they are embracing these sort of convenience type technology advances over the idea of privacy, over fears of government surveillance?
Yes, I mean, I totally agree with you. And I think, in fairness, it's not just our young people, but all of us. I know that I use my phone wherever I go. It's with me. It's a smartphone. I use it to communicate with people and to read on the internet and to post and report and to use for things like Twitter, social media. I'm as hooked on it as the younger people are, I guess. And technology in itself is not a bad thing. I'm not against technology or tech. But I think that there are always the darker elements and the darker sides, Cheryl, to it. And I think we just need to be so careful that we don't end up walking into a digital prison, because that really is what we're looking at with central bank digital currencies. And you're also very right about the fact that the vaccine passports, this digital vaccine passport, that hasn't gone away. They still want to take that back in. And in fact, it will probably be, or it could very well be, a part of the new world order system that is coming in, being spearheaded by the World Economic Forum and other supranational bodies like the World Health Organization, the United Nations, as well as many others, to enforce this, that if you don't take a vaccine or you don't take a shot, they may not agree to you being able to do your banking. It could lead to alternative communities forming, and that's something that I'm exploring at the moment.
So when you say alternative communities, do you just mean people who go sort of underground to hide away from the government's claws? Is that what you're talking about?
I don't mean hiding away. What I mean is that if people want to truly be free and not be forced to take mandated experimental vaccinations with things that you don't even know what they're putting into you. For example, the mRNA vaccinations that were getting distributed all over the world came with, as all vaccines come, you get a large piece of sheet of paper that has all the chemicals and all the ingredients and everything in it. And of course, that same thing happened with all the vaccines, except they were completely blank. To this day, they will never admit to what's in them. Nobody can tell what's in them. And they expect people to put that into their bodies, not knowing. And there are indeed a lot of evidence growing with myocarditis. I've just interviewed a doctor in Canada, and if you go onto my feed, you will see that. And it's deeply concerning. So I think alternative communities are not hidden away. They're not like trying to live in secret or anything like that. This is just people peacefully saying, we don't comply. We're not going to play your game. And I think the key to this, Cheryl, may be to form those communities around farmers, ranchers, people in the food industry, because they're trying to attack those things as well. They want control of the food supplies so that they can control all of us.
So one way, you're implying one way to fight this great reset, this World Economic Forum Agenda 2030, this one world order, whatever tag you want to put on it, is to become as self-sufficient as possible with people, with patriotic people who don't trust the government's narrative on many issues, right?
Absolutely correct. Yes, indeed. And I think that that has a huge appeal for freedom-loving people that want freedom of movement. Because if we talk about 15-minute cities just for a second, these are straight out of the Hunger Games film, if anybody's ever seen that. They even call them districts in real life, that you will not be allowed out of your district or you'll get fined. It's just an absolute control mechanism. That's what all of this is really all about. And I think people that love the Constitution, that love the Bill of Rights, in the United States. You're very lucky that you have these things because other countries don't. And, I love America. I love the system. I love the American people. And, of course, a lot of people in America are descended from the Scottish Highlanders that fled during the clearances. So there are Scottish people all over the world. And wherever you go, you will find somebody that's connected to us. But freedom and passion for living your life, the way you want to live your life, that's a God-given human right and a fundamental value that we must fight for every step of the way.
I'm glad you just used the phrase God-given, because the next question I was going to ask you may be a little bit sensitive because I don't know your religious beliefs and so forth. But what I consistently argue for is that God-given individual liberties is the ultimate war in America, right? All paths, all egregious offenses on the part of government come because of violations of God-given individual liberties. And I just wonder, never having been in your country, what is the tone and tenor of a statement like that? What is the tone and tenor of the Christian community where you're at?
Well, I mean, I am a God-fearing Christian. Jesus Christ is the King that's going to come. As far as I'm concerned, there is absolutely no doubt about that. But I respect people of all faiths and all religions. I think that we have, in fact, I can tell you that Justin Welby, who is the Archbishop of Canterbury in the United Kingdom, is a fully paid up member of the World Economic Forum, and the things that he comes out with, that's why the Anglican Church is dying, because they're not getting the truth. They're getting this sort of dystopian world, one world government type narrative, and unfortunately that's also happening. They haven't just infiltrated our governments and our state institutions, they have also infiltrated our religious institutions, and in fact they probably did that a long time before. So there is a very active Christian community in the United Kingdom. We're still what you would class as a Christian country, but there's a big but there, because these people are most definitely weakening it from within. They are like the proverbial sheep in wolf's clothing.
Yep, same thing here, Jim. There's been a sort of social justice gospel that's taken over many of the churches, and I was most alarmed during the coronavirus lockdowns. I was most alarmed when churches shut down here in America at government dictate. What did you think when you saw that overseas taking place in America?
Well, shocking. I mean, people have the right to assemble. Once again, your constitution, your rights protect all of that. Freedom of speech. All of these things are fundamentally written into it. And when I witnessed the Biden regime starting to crack down, it's just deeply concerning that people were forced to distance. The churches and places of worship were being forced, and we all know now that it was unnecessary. I mean, let's give you a good example of a country, a nation that didn't do that, and that was Sweden. They didn't have any lockdowns. They took a decision early on that they weren't going to do it, and it worked extremely well for them.
Absolutely. And look, I honestly, and you must be watching headlines as well. Do you see that sort of the coronavirus virus fears are starting to creep into the public discourse, the public consciousness again?
Yes, absolutely. Once again, this has been driven by the World Health Organization, and I had a conversation with somebody the other day, and they said, well, at least there's a doctor that's in charge of it. I said, do you mean Dr. Tedros? Yes. I said, well, you do realize he's not a medical doctor. He is, in fact, a doctor of philosophy, and he is still a paid-up member, as far as I'm aware, of the Tigray Liberation Front, which is a proscribed terrorist organization that is still proscribed as far as the American military are concerned.
Yeah, I mean, he's basically a card-carrying communist. We're crying out loud. But...
Yeah, well, I love it. You're bang on. I mean, that's exactly what he is. Yeah, there he is in charge of the World Health Organization. They're talking about deciding what kind of drugs a country can have. They're going to say when you're going to get locked down. And by the way, Cheryl, they don't need to give any evidence of this. They just need to say there's another pandemic and you're going to get locked down again. This is an anti-human globalist agenda. And I truly believe it is truly anti-human, and it needs this global threat that we are witnessing requires a global response. And I can tell you now, I know this is the first time we've spoken, but I'm speaking to a lot of people in the United States at the moment and in Canada, Australia, New Zealand, France, Holland, and of course the UK. And I'm discussing what needs to be done because I believe it needs a truly global response.
I agree with you. You and I, as you said, we're speaking for the very first time, but I think you and I do the same research and draw the same conclusions. And I just would like to finish up about Trump. What I see taking place with Trump, the umpteenth indictment that's being thrown his way, is just the left's way to keep him out of the White House because he is a true threat to this global movement. How do you see it?
Well, I followed Trump closely. I'm a Trump guy. My old boss, Nigel Farage, I was a Brexiteer, and I was also a parliamentary candidate with the European Parliament, and also Westminster elections in the United Kingdom back in 2019. And of course, Nigel Farage, my old boss, he was very close and is still close to President Trump. But I followed President Trump right from the start when he got first elected, and I followed the election. I stayed up in the early hours of the morning watching what was going on, and I could not believe he was leading all the way through until the point where they closed all the elections and sent everybody home pretending that it was all over, but in fact we now know it wasn't. Trump is a danger to the globalist establishment. I would encourage people in America to back and support him. I was very honoured, deeply honoured, that General Michael Flynn followed me on Twitter there just a week or two ago and very publicly acknowledged my work against the World Economic Forum. He's a great guy. I love General Flynn. And, at the end of the day, we all must do what we can to fight back for freedom and for humanity.
Well, well said. Well said. And you and I should stay in touch. You should come back on my podcast. We should talk again because you bring forth some important issues. And I think here in America, people like to know that other countries are fighting for freedoms as well. So, Jim Ferguson, thank you so much for being on Bold and Blunt. It was great to chat with you.
Well, I'm certainly bold and I'm slightly grayer than blonde, but hey, you know what? It's been an absolute pleasure to be with you, Cheryl, and I would be delighted to come back on with you anytime.
Excellent. Thank you. Well, there's a repeat guest for sure. Jim Ferguson. Find him on Twitter. His Twitter handle is @JimFergusonUK, JimFergusonUK. And find me on Twitter as well @CKChumley. And of course, that is CKCHUMLEY. If you like Bold and Blunt, remember you may get Bold and Blunt at edify.app, at washingtontimes.com, at Real Life Network, and wherever podcasts are offered. Don't forget, subscribe to Bold and Blunt to hear more of great guests like Jim Ferguson. Tune in next time, and in the meanwhile, stay blunt, stay bold.